Hi there, this is the third video in a series that I'm doing on working with fictional characters who show up in your dreams. So in the last one I was talking about active imagination, which is the technique that Carl Jung pioneered, and it's a sort of controlled daydream where we can talk to whoever shows up on the inside. Could be fantastic creatures, mythological figures, or in this case fictional characters, our own or other people's. So I was mentioning that the protagonist of my novel Soul Mapper, Lucas, and I have been in conversation all throughout the writing of that novel, which turned out to be, I think it was 93,000 words. So I wanted to give you a couple of examples of how this works. So at one point, because I'm writing a science fiction novel that's set only about 50 years in the future, I wanted to keep it real and grounded and vital that way. And so I did some research on where we will probably be with climate chaos at that time. And I built all that into the story. So at one point, I like to do active imagination when I'm out walking. So I was out doing a morning walk and a little bit dissociated, which is a good place to be when you're doing this. And so he showed up. And I was asking him, describe the world that you live in to me. And one thing he mentioned was that most of the beach towns were gone. They were underwater. And I thought, well, that's not supposed to happen for another maybe 100, 200 years or so if things continue the way they're going. And so I said, well, that's how he sees it, so I'm going to include that in my novel. So in my novel, a lot of beach towns and cities are underwater. So, and I should mention here, it's not a hopeless or dystopian novel by any means. I'm all about hope and what we can do about all this, right? And he's about that too. So a couple of weeks after, no, it was longer than that. A couple of months after he told me that, there was a study about the West Antarctic ice shelf and that it was breaking off earlier and that it might raise the sea levels around the world about 15 feet, about 5 meters. And so I think he was maybe a little bit ahead there of the rest of us. And that happens with these characters, and it happens in dreams too. There's an entry in Jung's Black Books, which are his journals. And by the way, I teach a class, like a tour through the Black Books for an outfit called Jung Platform. So that's there if you want it. And I mentioned that in 1942, Jung had a dream, and a dream fragment, and he only wrote it down a few sentences worth, and he said the climate is getting warmer and this is a catastrophe. This is 1942, right? So when people say it's just a dream, well, yeah, it sure is, right? That happens all the time, by the way. Those of us who work a lot with dreams, we see this all the time. Our unconscious knows more than the conscious mind does. It picks up more, it intuits more. And we learn to listen to it because it speaks a language that's symbolic. So through the writing of Soul Mapper, there's many characters in the book, and I consulted with most of them. Others just sort of popped in. And something that writers who are much greater than I am often mention, they're my exemplars, is that they write to figure out what these characters have to say. So there's an example I mentioned before where in one of his letters, Tolkien mentions that he was working on The Lord of the Rings, and then Boromir walked in. And he says something like, well, I kept going because I wanted to find out who Boromir was and what he wanted. And that happened numerous times when I was writing Soul Mapper. There's a character in the book whose name is Maryam Najjar. She's Palestinian. She showed up in my inner workings and also on the page probably about 7 or 8 months ago, which, by the way, was before all this recent bloodshed in Gaza, and before the attacks by Hamas, the recent attacks by Hamas. So she was there before all that, and she quickly became an important character, so much so that in working with her in active imagination, I've realized that I'm going to have to write 2 more novels, which I didn't think I was going to. So sometimes that's how it works. And when Soul Mapper came out, it was Soul Map. And because of starting work on the second novel and then jotting down ideas for the third, which she will be the protagonist of, I realized that the titles of all three novels had to be in the form of somebody doing something active. So I changed the title to Soul Mapper, and I'm working on the second novel right now. So more about that in the next video.